Welcome to Cauldron of Changes. I'm your host, Stephen Gunther, with the Fellowship of Avalon. We're a Wiccan church in Memphis, Tennessee, and part of the international organization, the Aquarian Tabernacle Church, which is out of Index, Washington. I hope you're having a great day and just enjoying being present in the moment. That's why we call it the present, because it's a gift. You could shake it, you could open it up, and see what joy and blessings each day might bring. On our show, we're going to be interviewing clergy, teachers, authors, musicians, and other figures in the Wiccan and Pagan world, and just kind of chat together from the heart. Our guest today is Reverend Sarah Osborne, who is a priestess at the Fellowship of Avalon. Sarah's also been a director of religious exploration at a local Unitarian Universalist church for over 12 years. And most recently, she's going to talk about completing her Masters of Divinity and being affirmed in the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. So I want to welcome Sarah in. All right, welcome, Sarah. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Stephen. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun. And like you and I do so often over coffee or a lunch, just kind of want to chat a little bit about what you've got going and kind of your thoughts about what's happening. You recently had this really journey you've been on, and it kind of is culminating even this week. If you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I made the decision to go to seminary. I wanted to earn a Masters of Divinity, and I attended Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago. And part of that is in my faith journey, I identify as a Unitarian Universalist pagan. And so this was sort of the culmination of my spiritual education. And I work at a UU congregation. And so what I like to say about my spiritual development is that, you know, the Unitarian Universalist is like the cup that holds my values. And then Wicca and paganism is like the flame that rises up from the cup with my practices and things. And so I went to seminary. It was a 3-year-long process of going full-time to school. And in the middle of that, part of the requirements was doing a unit of clinical pastoral education. And usually that happens in a hospital, providing chaplaining care for folks. But I ended up, because of the pandemic, doing mine at a summer camp with teens and youth. And so that was a pretty exciting experience. And then I did a half-time 2-year internship with a program called Beloved Conversations. And it was a wild ride. And then it culminated with an appointment with something called the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. It's a little bit like defending a doctoral thesis dissertation. And I was asked a bunch of questions and had to preach for 10 minutes and be able to answer a variety of theological and mundane questions or practical questions in the process. And so I have finally been affirmed in the Fellowship of Unitarian Universalist Ministry. So that's pretty exciting. It just adds a little bit something extra to my spiritual journey, having already been clergy with the ATC and the Fellowship of Avalon for some years now.
That's pretty exciting. I've watched you on this. I know it's been a lot of work it's been 3 long years. For those that don't know, when we talk about Unitarian Universalists, how does paganism and Wicca fit into that? I know a lot of people think it's still a traditional Christian church, but explain to everybody how that fits in.
Right. So in Unitarian Universalism, it is a faith where everyone is welcome. And it does have a long history in the roots of Christianity and Judaism, but it is a living faith. It's an evolving faith. And as we come to recognize the depth and breadth of human experiences, we welcome in other sources that we draw from. And so Earth-centered traditions is one of 6 sources that we recognize as a way for us to find spiritual nourishment and connection. And so that's where the tie-in there is Unitarian Universalism is a welcoming place where people can explore their spirituality in ways that feel right for them. And we expect people to be searching for the truth as they so identify it.
Okay. So earth-centered kind of being the big umbrella, if you will, paganism and Wicca
Exactly.
or Norse traditions, anything that might fall into that.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So we have a hymnal book that has a category for pagan chants or hymns, and
Is
some
there a
of the
little
readings
pinnacle in the corner? Like, is there a
that
special
no, there's
thing?
no pinnacle in the corner, but I mean, it's recognized as such. And we have readings
Right.
like from Starhawk in there. And we also have something called our 7 principles, although that is currently under review and may change. We may add an 8th principle soon, or we may revise all of them all together. But one of them is recognizing and respecting the interdependent web of which we are all a part of. And so for me, that's really the strongest connection as well to Wicca and to paganism, is celebrating our interconnection in that way.
I think that's a good word. I know we use that a lot, but interconnectedness, that
Mhm.
there's so much we can do together, and
Absolutely.
make a bigger impact if we can all that, as well as just seeing how we are interconnected to the climate. I mean, look at this week in Florida and the weather, and just we're
Mhm.
interconnected to the planet, to each
Mhm.
other, to our food
Yeah,
chain. I think recognizing that on a large scale is important for people's spirituality as well. That we're
right.
not just here to take what we need from the earth and disregard it.
Exactly. I mean, I think ultimately what we're all looking for is wholeness, and finding wholeness requires a level of balance as well. And so when we become as the majority culture experiences in this country, we find ourselves disconnected from nature, from each other. And so that's where power comes into play. And so people who have power, they want to have power over instead of power with. And so we're trying to change that dynamic to say that we can have power with. And I think that's really essential, because that is a healing power, and that is a power that acknowledges our connection with the earth. And I think that's when we cut ourselves off from that. That's how we feel empty, or we feel unfulfilled, because we're just not remembering our place in the universe.
And I think, again, you and I have chatted about this before, but with the pandemic and the isolation that came with that, it just exacerbated that whole feeling of being not connected all of a sudden, where the virtual hug, there's no such thing. It doesn't take the place of really being able to be around people, face to face and in person. And
Mhm.
uh, I'm just so glad to be back together. But I think you're right. We were already feeling that, maybe because of electronics and social media and different things that were not connecting us, but actually, in a way, disconnecting us, because we were trading
Mhm.
online for a real person, for in real life. Um, and I think, do you think we can bring everybody back together again? I mean, do you think we'll get back to that connectedness that we had? And I'm going to go back even a little bit further, but growing up, or even when I was a young man, and you were more connected to the neighborhood, and
Mhm.
everybody just became like Batman. They come home to their house, you hit the clicker, open the garage door, nobody waves, nobody says hi, shut the back cave. And you used to wave at people, or maybe people would walk in the evenings, and people would be on the porch, and I hope that we can get back to some of that connectedness, even at a
Mhm.
neighborhood level or a church level. you
Yeah.
know, Donuts and
I
coffee,
think,
man.
yeah. I mean, I lament losing some of those things. And I think one of the things we have to recognize is that we are always changing. The world is changing. We are changing. People are changing. And so the important piece here is to remember that as we change, the question really isn't can we go back, or can we have this or that? It's yes and. So I believe that yes, technology and online community is here to stay. And I think it serves a really important function. I think it's a way for people who are isolated, or people who are maybe a little scared, can tiptoe their way into a community, or they can at least find community when they may be geographically isolated. But I think there's also that room to be physically connected, whether that's to go outside and stick your feet in the dirt, or whether that's to meet up at with a coven, or with a church like the Fellowship of Avalon, to have that community, because we are creatures that require touch. And so being in physical proximity with other people, I think, is essential to who we are as beings. And that's not to say, though, that, we can't have meaningful conversations and connections online as well. And when I say touch, I don't mean like crossing healthy boundaries. I mean just the simple handshake or elbow touching if it's more comfortable for people to experience. But just to be in that proximity, I think, is definitely important. But as one of our friends says, and celebrates the goddess changing woman, she touches everything she changes, and she changes everything she touches. And so I think that we have to acknowledge that we are ever unfolding and ever moving and ever learning. And so I think it's essential to remember that we can't necessarily go back, but we can create something brand new. And that's the part that is exciting to me, is to figure out what is that next version of reality for us.
I agree. And, it's one of the reasons I wanted to call this show Cauldron of Changes, because it's constant change and metamorphosis. And you're right. I take the position of the old guy sometimes. Oh, if we could just go back, but you're right. And with in something new. I think that's key. And it's simple. You're right. We shouldn't long for, something that we had. We should be creating something that's new and better and current and meets the needs of people today. So
yeah, I read I read somewhere, someone, I think her name is Reverend Leslie Takahashi. She said that she was defining what evil was, and she said that evil is the thing that prevents you from engaging in transformative community. And I thought, wow, what a powerful way to kind of look at things. Like, so the bad things are the things that prevent us from transformation and change and being in community. So I think it's essential to have these conversations and to be thinking about how we can do it.
Those are good words. Those are positive. I like that. Question. You spent 3 years, and I have watched you, writing and reading and studying and not having time for much of anything else outside of your family, and what a commitment that was. Now you've done this, you've done preaching, you've done the summer camp and the different things you've gone through. What do you feel like there's a message on your heart that somehow has been planted through all of this? Is there something new? I hear lots of new thoughts, and that was fantastic what you just said about going forward with something new. But are there other messages or things that you really feel called to speak on?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you asked me that, because I had just delivered a sermon on about Kuan Yin and about heeding the cries of the world, because Kuan Yin's name means she who hears the cries of the world. And what I have recognized, part of my formation process with this program that I recently did, was I had to collect a lot of the things that I had written. And over time, over 3 years, you start seeing trends, or you start seeing themes that pop up again and again. And the one thing that popped up for me over and over again was this concept of grace, which may also be called compassion. And I don't talk about grace in sort of that Christian understanding of unmerited gifts, but I think of grace as more of that kindness or compassion, or the energy that we bestow to ourselves and to each other, that helps us to keep evolving and keep growing. There's nothing worse than getting stuck or refusing to change. That's what creates some grief and misery for us. And so if we can learn to have grace for ourselves, if we can learn to just be kind and compassionate, to reduce feelings of shame or guilt, then we can really tap into our power. We can tap into our individual power, and we can tap into collective power. And really, that's exciting to me, because when we can all just be more generous and graceful with each other, that's how we find liberation. That's how we find freedom. That's how we find our wholeness. And it's in what I have seen in the world. is the opposite of grace, where we have polarizing differences of opinions, where we have those armchair warriors who are just out there, attacking and being unkind. And, if we can just laughter sometimes is even grace, like when we just laugh something off. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't hold people accountable or that we shouldn't have standards and that we shouldn't have healthy boundaries. But what I am saying is that if we can try to extend grace to each other, to understand each other better, to understand people's different lived experiences, I think that's going to be key to living a healthy life and to living a magical life, frankly.
I agree with you in particular on the word grace. So that keeps coming back to me as well. Kuan Yin is a goddess I work with as well. And you're right. We all kind of grew up, I think most of us, in the church, and it was unmerited love or undeserved favor, something we didn't deserve. It was so nebulous. But like in really simplistic terms, I've come to realize part of it on my end that rhymes with grace is space. Giving someone space. I don't know how their day was. Maybe somebody was short with me. Maybe there's something I don't know that's going on, or maybe somebody is, slow in the aisle at the grocery store. All the little things that we just go from 0 to 10 on today. We just go from, smiley to, I'm going to beat you. You see this just so much, even on social media, the tempers and the impatience of people. So I think part of it sometimes is just as simple as giving a little space, and for ourselves, all we can really do is the best that we can. We are limited to the amount of time in a day, in a week, in a year. And I think that grace is giving ourselves space and giving space to others that we don't know what's happening in their life. It's a super simple way for me, but it's something I can realize, when I get short tempered or I get frustrated or I'm at the grocery store or someplace, and just give everybody a little space. It's easy to do. And you're right. But as easy it is, that is extending grace and compassion.
Yeah, so. Definitely. I really like how you said, referred to it as space. I think space also means rest and giving ourselves that buffer. And in that space also means like engaging in spiritual practices, engaging in something that we go to again and again that helps us to ground and center. Even just taking like 3 deep breaths can be grace, or that space,
That's true. You just sometimes we make it too complicated. You're right. Just a few breaths, or sometimes just going outside and just grounding. Like if you have the ability to do that, go outside and stand in the lawn or in the dirt, or just sometimes those little physical things can act as a reset, I think, in some ways for us. And again, to the interconnectedness, when you walk outside or you are automatically in a space where you realize with nature and animals and neighbors and whatever it might be, but we're not alone. We are interconnected. And that the grace that we extend, people pick up on. When we do that, I do think people notice little kindnesses. And I think maybe that's how we get people to share more of that too, and give each other space.
Yeah, I've noticed too for my own self, like when I go places now, because I've sort of reflected and integrated all of these ideas into myself that weren't necessarily, maybe they were sort of there, but I hadn't been able to articulate them like I can now. When I go out, people notice that. Like people tell me things now. All the time people are coming up to me and talking to me. And I'm thinking, am I like just exuding like a presence that makes me feel safe to people? It's kind of what I wonder about these days. But, when you can orient yourself, even if you just get into a practice every morning of doing something really short and small, it's the thing that just takes all kind of like the wild energy that's floating around and just kind of brings it back down, brings it back to your heart. And then you can go out and face the day. And of course, you might float back up and get all wild again. And then you just say, oh, let me have this moment and bring myself back. And we have to do it over and over again.
And I do think that there is that, as you were saying, that people just perceive you when you're really like walking in that, in the divine, and the God and goddess are on you, and that compassion and that grace. I do think people can see that. I do think people can feel that. I mean, I've met people that I haven't known. It was maybe in passing or at an event, but I just felt like, wow, this, it's a privilege to be with this person today. They were so kind to me, or gentle to me, or affirming to me. And I think people they do pick up on that. And I think that's what we want, people to feel that openness to communicate and connect, and how we meet each other's needs. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I oftentimes find those moments when I am having a low day and I go out and someone says something to me and they don't even realize how profound it is. And I'll say, oh my goodness, the goddess is speaking through you. You were saying something I really needed to hear today. And that just makes me feel full circle. It makes me feel like I've come back to remembering who I am and whose I am.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. I wanted to ask you too. You had mentioned that your home Unitarian Universalist congregation, you have a new message coming up, and I thought was pretty exciting. And you're just going to lay it all out there.
Yeah, I am. So we're having a Halloween celebration, all things witchy. And it's a fun time because I think, we have the more serious intentional Samhain, but this is more on the fun, humorous side of when I think it's important for us not to take ourselves too seriously. And so I have a service coming up called 100% That Witch, sort of a play on the Lizzo Song of Truth Hurts. And so I'm going to be talking about the witch and what she represents in our culture, and why the witch may be feared and what those tropes are about. And when I announced this to some of the folks in there who are going to be helping with me this service, everyone had to start telling me about, the legends of the witch, or like the true story of where witches came from. And it was so delightful to hear everyone's version, which was completely different than the next. And so I thought, okay, like this is important. Like people are curious about this, and they all have their own versions. And so I think it's important for us to kind of look at that and say, why is this a character that has in the past been something to be feared? And how can we change the script so that witch is maybe something that is seen as an empowering figure, which is how I view being a witch. And so I'm excited to share some wisdom from various authors and people's experiences in this occasion coming up.
It sounds exciting and challenging for some of the folks, I'm sure, but I like your way you're heading into that. As you said, kind of the origin of witch is not the origin story. Like we don't have like a good like Marvel quality origin story for the witch, but oftentimes they were the wise woman or the herbalist, and I think there's a huge midwife. There is a history of that. That was sort of, when we look back, maybe that would have been what we would have called a witch today. But back then she was just the wise woman or the herbalist or the lady that knew secret stuff, passed down. And when it wasn't fearful.
Right. Yeah. And I think the thing that unites all of those stories is these were empowered people, right? These are people who maybe lived in a society where power, especially for women, was marginal at best. And so these are folks that, figured out how to live their most authentic life, do what they needed to do for survival, and didn't depend upon others. And so, they were the midwives and the herbalists and the brewers and the people that you went to when you had problems, where you could really be honest and truthful with them. And so I think that's an important thing to remember, that witches, or people that were identified as witches, were people that kind of spoke their own truth and had their own power to begin with. And there's nothing more scary than someone who walks their own authentic life.
I look forward to that. And when is that coming up?
That's going to be on October 30th.
So if you're around the Memphis area, you can get more information from us if you'd like to come and hear Reverend Sarah speak and talk about the origin story of witches. And that'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm also going to
Eye-opening for people.
Yeah, and we're gonna have fun with it too. We're gonna do a story time with the story Room on the Broom, which is about making space for other people and
Right.
sort of connecting between the two ideas of like individual empowerment, but also that interconnected message. You know, where
That's why they keep putting more people on the broom, right?
yes,
I
yes.
think I've heard you read that for a children's church before.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So yeah, we're inviting people to come in costume and dress up and have fun with it because sometimes costumes can be empowering. Maybe you're being a little bit more yourself when you actually dress up. There's something revealing even when you wear a mask. There's a quote. I'm sure I'm going to probably butcher it, but it's Bob Dylan says, when you wear a mask, you can't help but tell the truth. And I think that's really true. And I think that's part of the appeal of the celebration of Halloween.
Yeah, it's a little extra freedom I think we feel behind a mask.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to say thank you for coming and being on the show and just chatting a little bit. I really enjoyed it. Again, so just pleased for you, proud of you, happy for you with what you accomplished with your masters and getting affirmed into the fellowship. That's just tremendous that someone whose roots are pagan and Wiccan and can really bring that into a broader base and enhance people's spirituality. I congratulate you, and it's a great thing. So thanks for being my guest today, and I'm sure we'll chat again.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you all for watching today on Cauldron of Changes. Thank you for watching. Ask you to subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media, all that good stuff. Until next time, may the blessings of the God and Goddess meet all of your needs, nourish and comfort you, and help you manifest your best life. Blessed be, friends. We'll see you next time.